Yo, so this is gonna be a project file breakdown of my song called Fine. I'm gonna play you a bit of the song first, so you have some idea, but I recommend you go listen to the full thing on my SoundCloud or the Bandcamp or wherever, just so you get an idea what I'm even talking about, because of course, a lot of this will make a lot more sense when you heard the song. I'm just gonna quickly play you a little bit of it here in the final master and then go into an earlier version of the project file. So that's the basic vibe. I think the whole song is kind of built around, I guess, the idea of two kind of different types of section that are kind of juxtaposed against each other. So we've got the more kind of ambient and sort of collage type sections, which are this type of stuff here. And then we've got this drum loop here. As you can see, my CPU is really suffering. And then I kind of tried to arrange the two in a way that kind of makes sense. So I've got this intro here, and then it goes into sort of builds this drum loop more and more. And then you go into this orchestral section. Then you get back to the kind of drop, the drum type stuff. But it kind of... it becomes more ambient as you go on, and then there's this kind of section that's technically the drop, but not really. And then it sort of fades out into a longer ambient kind of part. So the way this was written was just I started with this drum loop, and then I kind of wrote this contrasting section, and then I kind of found ways to merge them into each other. And sort of try to find ways to get these vocal samples and this, I think it's in the melodic group here, this vocal motif to kind of reinforce the whole thing and kind of create a kind of constant motif, I guess, throughout the song. So it sort of makes sense as one thing despite the contrast. So I'm gonna have to deactivate some groups here. I'm just gonna turn off the drums for now. Just so we can have a bit more CPU and kind of activate all these little bits here and kind of look at the individual elements in the song. Because I bounced a lot of this just onto the group tracks and then deactivated stuff, because the Soul EP is very processing intensive. There's a lot of stuff going on. Just in terms of the main vocal, this is the kind of main vocal which is just... it used to be a recording of me singing once, but I processed it a ton. So like, should be coming in somewhere here, maybe here. And I kind of used this as a motif throughout the whole song. So this, you can see here, this is kind of a bounced version of the thing. But then later I bring in these doubles here. Just to make it sound a bit bigger. And then also there's tons and tons of processing on this just to get it to sound right. It starts with auto-tune and then all kinds of EQs and reverbs and lots of volume automation. And then I've got these 3 sends here inside the vocal group where it's just different aspects of the vocal kind of reinforced and layered to get some more size out of it. So I've got the squash group here. Let me find some bit where it's actually turned on. Actually, it's never turned on. It's just this last bit here, I guess. Which I guess I just felt it needed this as a riser or something. Then I've got this pitch shifting group, which I assume is gonna be like layers and stuff. So if we listen to this, we can kind of turn all these off. So this starts with a vocal and then I use different effects to generate a layer for the vocal from it. So what I like to do is I like to get these pitch shifters and pitch shift stuff up and down and mix them in with the original sound. Just to kind of create different octaves, almost like different vocal registers from singers, but in a very sort of grainy, gritty, ugly kind of way. Then I've got this delay, which I think just adds some... Yeah, it's all the way soft. So it kind of just acts like a reverb. Some chorus, some OTT. Some EQ, which, yeah, it's just some random EQ stuff. And then a tool I'm not using for, I assume I wanted to volume automate this but didn't. And then I have a separate sort of reverb layer, which is this. Where I'm using this tool that's being modulated by an audio sidechain to kind of gate this reverb, I guess. So it doesn't have too long tails. I just wanted to make the sound kind of bigger. And I've did some saturation before the reverb and some EQ after. Just some whatever to make it fit the mix, I guess. Nothing too exciting, and then that overall just sort of leads you to this kind of build of the vocal where it starts quite small and fades in, and then near the end there's a section that's sort of really centered around the vocal where it gets all these different layers generated from it to make it sound a bit bigger. So I'm gonna deactivate these now to buy myself some CPU power. And then I've got this horn thing here, which kind of is this thing that acts in the background mostly, I think. So if I just turn this on here and see loads of different processing effects and so on and going inside it. So the basic sound is like a sampler, and I just wanted this to get some kind of pace for the song that's melodic, so you can hear quite repetitive. Just to reinforce the kind of pulse of the song. So I just, this processing is all sort of basic mixing stuff. Compressor, EQ. A chain that's not doing anything apparently. A transient split that kind of limits the volume of the transients. Who kind of turn down the percussiveness of this a bit because the sample had a lot of dirt in it. So I want to mostly focus on the tones kind of and less on the transients, I guess. Oh yeah, this is bounced, so we're not hearing any of that right now. So this used to be a MIDI clip that was playing all this. And then I bounced it and deactivated the sampler. So this all is now inactive. And then we've got this chain here that's turned on at some point. That's just some basic kind of widening stuff. Some harsh delay and some blur. That's turned on for... Oh, it's gonna be turned on at some point. Yeah, you can see here. It's turned on for the more ambient sections to kind of give it some more width and kind of blur it out a bit. And I've got this layer here, which is just the ambient sections. Just kind of heavily automated vocal layers. So if we... Ah no, it's actually not the ambient section, it's kind of the drop section, because a thing I did with this quite a lot is that I really wanted stuff to sound snappy. So I did a ton of volume automation and kind of fading out tails and just really reinforcing the grooves of the bass. Kind of the way it cuts off really helps reinforce the beat in my opinion. So, and then I've got some multi-note here that just adds 2 octaves higher, just to give some variation in the drop here. And then these risers are kind of just they go into this bass fill that I've got at the end of every section, just to give that more impact. And a lot of stuff, as you can see, it kind of changes around the bass fill. So a lot of stuff cuts out for this and sort of really gives it the space it needs. Then what I got next? This is just some ambience for the drop, just because I felt there was some room in the mix, I guess. So this is some pretty basic sort of resample the vocal, put it in a sampler, just move it around a bit. Add some movement with like pitch shifters, EQs, some widener, some reverb here, and some compressor. Just some kind of sound design stuff to give the drop a bit more space. This doesn't really do too much. I think on this melodic group here, there's some stuff that's maybe somewhat interesting for the mixing, but other than that, this is kind of the more ambient section now. So there's this melodic motif here, which is just 2 layered synthesizers with a lot of automation. See here, I just kind of automated the cutoff to give it these broad kind of movements. Then what have we got here? This track is almost empty. I think this is just gonna be some random little riser bit. No, actually this is quiet. I just forgot to delete this, I guess. There we've got the drop ambience. Now we've got that thing. Here's some more cut up stuff for the intro. You can see lots of cutting stuff, cutting tails, trying to get stuff to be more tight. This is just going to be some FX stuff, I assume. Oh, it's actually quiet. I don't know if it's gonna... No, I guess it remains quiet for now. And then I've got some second hook melodic parallel layer, so this is just to give the second hook more impact once again. Just sending a bunch of melodic stuff to this to kind of reinforce the size of this. I decided to mute this, but the idea behind this was just to add this extra space to it. And then let's deactivate the melodic group, so we can take a closer look at the basses. I'm gonna activate these all. You can see there's a lot of sort of stuff going on, even some reverb on the basses and such. Most of these basses are, of course, focused around the drop bits. So I'm gonna delete this stuff here and just play you like the standard bass here. This is sort of the main bass line the song is centered around. This is the intro, so it's filtered. So the way this is built is that I made this multi-sample of different basses from like mud pies and so on, and then I mapped the velocity of this, I think. Let's look at this here. So this is kind of velocity automated, so inside these MIDI clips you'll be able to see that well, these have different velocities, and depending on which velocity it is, kind of picks a different sample. So I try to just reinforce the motif here. You can see if I go down here, you can kind of create these different variations of sound, which is quite neat, with multi-sampling that you just can't quite get with a synthesizer. So then I've got various processing on here, just some look at the automation. Just some tools, some gain staging, I guess. Some distortion here. Just makes it a lot louder. And then an FX layer that just has like some blurry stuff in parallel, just to give it a little more space. And here without. It really makes it louder and just gives it more space, and then distorting it again. So yeah, that's the kind of bass. There's the second bass here, that's the sort of bass fill. And then this is, I assume this is gonna be some cut up stuff. Just yeah, just resampled the second bass and kind of did some crossfades on the samples to really tighten it, really get that sort of tighter groove. Really cutting all the tails off and making it more percussive. So then we've got the second bass, which is just, you know, this kind of sound, which just it's quite a basic phase 4 patch. The way I like to do this is that I have this whoop stuff here, and then I just map this to a lot of different parameters and kind of see how I can get it to sound nice, kind of reinforce the movement. So this is the basic movement of the bass, and these are some other automation curves. Just gonna turn off all the effects so you can kind of hear what it's doing. Just find that these effects add a lot of depth to the sound. Yeah, as you can hear, without this, it's basically just the bass that's moving a bit. And I've got my classic pitch shifter stuff here, automating the mix a bit. Yeah, which also adds this nice graininess, some EQ, some kind of crispening. So we've got a dry layer here, and then it's just some subtle high-end kind of stuff this is adding. Can't really hear it right now because I've got the sub replacement later on. Then loads of pitch shifters, dynamics, that kind of stuff, and then this is, I assume, gonna be for one specific section of the song where I just, yeah, this is, oh, what is this? Wait, do I turn this on off? Chain on off, this kind of part. Let me unmute this layer here. Yeah. You can't really hear anything. I don't know what happened there, but like this is just kind of turning this into some high-end riser kind of thing, I guess. And then at the last end of the chain, because I messed with the sound so much, what I tend to do is I just put my little sub-gen rag on here. I've made a video about this. This is just to kind of separate the sub from the rest of the sound. So I can take the original sound, kind of key track a high pass on this, and then I can just put in a sub. That's kind of a bit cleaner. Then I've got the original sound here, which just, you know, has all the movement but doesn't mess with my low end. So these are the kind of basses for the drop bit. Then I've got this bass here, which is the longer bass line for the, I guess, more ambient sound designy bit. So it's really quite a messy bass. And I also cut the low frequencies from it, because I've also got this sub bass here, which is just a basic sub with some sort of noise added into it and stuff. And then I've got this, what's this? This is gonna be some kind of impact. So a lot of these kind of impact sounds are really about intuition more than there's any kind of logic to it. It's just, I try to kind of move to the song and feel where I want a rhythmic emphasis to be and what I kind of want the broader gesture of the song to be, especially for these ambient bits. That's quite important. You can hear how sort of there's this ebb and flow that I want to reinforce. And as a result of that broadcast, the crisis has deepened dramatically. So that's something I like to do quite a lot. And then what I've also got for this ambient bit here are these glitch drums. That's some kind of riser here. So all these are just lots of different samples I kind of layered in. And they're not strictly speaking all drum related, but they kind of reinforce the main beats of the song to keep it moving. And then just loads of pan sound designy stuff to kind of create this ambience and add some interest to the section, I guess. So that's the kind of thing, and now I'll go to the drums a bit, because I did quite a lot to those and had to do a lot to my drums, activate the drums, deactivate all the rest just so we save some CPU. I wouldn't do this while producing, but it's just easier for video if we kind of single out these individual elements. You can see these are all bounced already. But I've got the kind of the kicks, the snares, the perks, the hats. So the way I like to do my kicks is that I just keep these in this kind of grid patch as long as I possibly can, because I don't really have any processing on this, as you can see. Okay, I do have a bit, but like I try to do most of it just by adjusting the pitch envelope and the volume of my grid patch, kind of in the context of the song, to kind of mix it that way. And then I guess I felt the need to do some kind of mixing stuff here, so let's listen what it sounds like without. Just making it louder. I use the saturation almost to kind of soften the kick a bit, because it kind of clips the tips off and it makes it sound less digital, I guess, kind of glues it together more. Because you can see here we've got kind of the basic kick. Actually, that's might be interesting. So we've got these two tracks that the kick is made of. We've got the basic kick track, which is really clean. Let me just mute this. Clean kind of sine wave type of thing, especially if we turn this processing off. And then we've got the dirt layer, which is kind of just using some blurs and then some tape saturation, some kind of test tone to fade in this noise to the kick, some unfiltered audio, vinyl and so on, just to make it sound a bit more organic, you know. We listen to it with and without. Just add some tail, add some roominess to the kick. So that's the kick drum. Let me take a look at the snare next. So this snare drum is probably gonna have way too many layers, because that's what I like to do. Got the main snare group here, and you can see I try to kind of give different parts of the song different layers just to create some more variation. The main snare is, it's actually not a snare I made, that's quite rare. I usually use my own snares, but I guess in this case I just used the snare from a sample pack and then later brought in some layers. And here without the layer it's kind of like this. And then this just adds some sort of roominess and kind of interest to the snare, just to keep it moving. And then I've got this this other snares here, which is just a kind of ghost snare, which is gonna be a bit quieter. So if we just take a look at this here, you can see this is quite a loud snare, and then it's got it's this kind of sound, so it's barely even a snare. Just some kind of snare sample from my sample pack that I just processed a bit to kind of make the offbeat snares a bit less emphasized, and this isn't sidechained. We're gonna go into the sidechaining in a bit, because I did quite a lot of sidechaining here. Then we've got the percussion, which is just random nonsense. Just some cymbals, some glitchy sounds. Mostly active in this intro bit here, and then comes in a bit later, where it's mostly just these kinds of cymbals to reinforce the main beats. I really, especially when the rhythms are a bit more offbeat, it helps to keep track of the main beats and have some kind of element that just doesn't try to be fancy or anything, just tries to reinforce them. So I've got this cymbal here. And then all the heads are just pretty, there's lots of heads I assume, yeah, just different heads kind of layered to give it a different groove, all with sort of a bit of randomization of transient shapers on them to give them some life. You know, just to add some interest. And then I've got this room reverb here for the drums, which I bounced the input for, and then just add some room to the drums. Let's listen to the drums with and without. Let's just here. Let's go here. It's quite a subtle effect, but it adds a little bit of movement. And then there's some sidechaining to the bass going on, I guess. I don't know why I did that, but apparently I thought I'd want to do that. So that's the sort of basic thing. I've got all my sidechain triggers here on sends that I just bounced out, so you can see that the kick is routed to the sidechain trigger track, and then this does all the sidechaining. So the sidechain group, I actually sidechained the melodic stuff and the basses sort of separately, because I wanted more aggressive sidechaining on the basses. And then I had a bit less sidechaining on the melodic stuff, so I'm gonna activate this again. And then maybe sort of turn off the drums, and then sort of walk you through my sidechaining structure. For these drop bits, mostly in the ambient bits I didn't really sidechain too much. So on the basses I have some saturation to glue them all together, some EQ here, and then some old version of my kind of sidechain patch, which is not being triggered right now for some reason. Maybe because I deactivated the drums, I don't know. Yeah, I had to have fixed that later, but this just sidechains to the kick, this sidechains to the snare. And then I've got some saturation here, and then for the melodic stuff, the sidechaining is sort of a bit more fancy. Whatever. So I've got quite a bit of sidechaining here. This isn't sidechain, okay, so this is sort of basic mixing stuff. Then I did some pure unmask, so like some kind of spectral sidechaining. That kind of only affects the mid of the melodic, because I really wanted the bass to punch through. So I just unmasked the bass here. And then additionally I only sidechained the mids to the drums. And the sides are just open because it kind of gives them more space, and this isn't so loud, so I felt it was fine to not really sidechain all the sides as well. So these kind of can remain open and make the overall song sound a bit more spacious, and I think that's it. For the mastering, I did most of that in another project file. I kind of like to do my mastering. I started while doing the mix, and then I later move on to another project file where I bounce out the master, deactivate all the tracks, and then I drag all projects into one file and kind of master the EP together. So I did some basic mastering here, which is just some multi-band compression, some kind of saturation. This is just clipping basically. I didn't want a limiter on this because I've got limiters on the groups where I need them, so I already made sure with this oscilloscope that I really don't go above 0 dB much, so I don't trigger the limiters much, and then I've just got this clipper for the drums, and then the rest is just metering. So basically my mastering is just this tiny little bit, and then some clipping here. Because in essence I kind of mastered the groups by clipping them, and I tend to kind of master the basses by sort of more clipping saturation type stuff, and the melodic stuff I want to keep a bit less distorted, so I just used Pro L instead on safe mode. And that's kind of the overall song. Hope you found that somehow useful. I'll see you on the next one.